Reuben, the Seminole Indians. Reuben, thou art my firstborn. This was the firstborn of Israel. My might and the beginning of my strength. Let me tell you something. There's so, I probably could have put about 30 slides together for Reuben. Like, Reuben to this day is still at war with the North American Indians. Reuben is one of the only tribes that was actually able to fight off the Spanish. Like, when you go down to the Aztecs, to the Incas, to the Mayans, when they were fighting the Spanish, like, even, remember earlier I brought up Galvarano. Galvarano, even though he had those blades tied to the nubs of his arms, they still lost to the Spanish because they couldn't pierce their armor. Let me tell you something. They had a long bow that they were using flint and snake bones and busting through that armor, killing the Spanish. You know, but give the Lord a hand. Give Reuben a hand. You know what I'm saying? They were killing the Spaniards who came there. To this day, Reuben is the only one that wasn't conquered because of that strength, because of that excellency. That's the Seminole Indians right there. You understand? It says the excellency of dignity. Now, Reuben was known as the civilized nations. Even the white man respected Reuben. Right. Even the white man noticed their dignity that they had, their honor that they had, the excellency of power. Now, unfortunately, unstable as water. Now, what does unstable as water mean? It means that your ways are movable. It means that you're not locked directly into the truth. And if your ways are movable and you're not locked directly in the truth, then you're liable to do something like this. Thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up into thy father's bed and defiled it. He went up into my couch. Meaning what? Reuben went and he slept with his stepmother. You understand? And as a result of that, this is why, like, they don't have no Aztec, Incan Empire or nothing like that. You know what I'm saying? Listen, I went to a Seminole County. I used to live in Florida. I ain't meet not one Seminole. You know what I'm saying? And that's because of what he did in his ancestry. That's because what his forefather did. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't have that dignity. I mean, even if you look back to when they tried selling Joseph into slavery, the reason why they didn't kill Joseph, my personal forefather, is because Reuben said, don't kill him for our father's sake. Even in wickedness, he had some dignity. Right. Now, I talk about sidebar, little joke. I talk about this with Captain Chaataza. He was talking about, he goes, yeah, Judah, we sold your ass into slavery. I said, yeah, then you came back begging for food stamps, didn't you? just a little bit of a joke. I ain't trying to split the kingdom again. It's one nation now. All right. You can tell that drink kicked in, right? Next slide. Now, look at how they dress. Look at the dignity. Look at the pride. Look at the mitre that they had. Look at the same headpiece that you saw in that petroglyph in Puerto Rico. And when you take a look at them, look how separately they dress from that rough cowhide of Gad. You understand? Take a look, like this looks like a dignitary you send to go talk to an emperor or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got a king in Israel. Who we gonna send to go talk to this cat about opening trade negotiations? We gonna send Reuben. Reuben gonna be the dignitary. You understand? This is the Seminole Indians. Now let's get into a little bit of history and understanding of Reuben. Next slide. The Creek. This is another name for the Seminole. The Mohegans is another name for the Seminoles. This is the collection of these nations. Understand? The Creek and the American Indian people originally from the southeastern United States, not to be confused with the Cree, who are found in Canada. The Creek are also known by their original name, Muscogee. Now, remember what we said earlier. What was the Muskegean verb? What was the Muskegean language? It was molded in Hebrew. You understand? Their language, Muscogee, is a member of the Creek branch of the Muskegean family, and we know that their language was Hebrew. And they were known as the 5 civilized tribes. Why? Because Reuben had that respect and dignity even amongst his enemies. Next slide. Now, the term Seminole is a derivative of Cimarron, which means wild men. Why? Because they are unstable as water. These are wild men. These are men that you cannot mess with, that you cannot conquer, that they ain't make no treaty with the so-called white man. You understand? The original Seminoles were given this name because they were the Indians who had escaped from slavery in British-controlled northern colonies. When they came to Florida, they were not called Seminoles. They were actually Creeks, the Indians of Muscogee derivation. The Muskegean tribes comprised of the Mississippian culture, which were temple mound builders. Remember what we talked about the mound builders earlier, and pay attention to this word, Appalachian. The Appalachian was one of the 5 tribes or families that made up of this Seminole family, these Seminole tribes. Next slide. Though some of the tribes actually owned African slaves, the Seminoles never did. Stop trying to put that on the Seminoles. And matter of fact, this is what most of Gad did. Indeed, many black Africans escaping from slavery in the Carolinas and Georgia came to Florida and built settlements near the Seminoles. They formed a union with the Seminoles based upon both of their mutual fear of slavery, meaning they realized we have a common enemy, the so-called white man. We better join together or we're both going to be enslaved. Right. And then they stayed free. That's right. You understand? That's right. Which lets you know what the hell that we got to do. That's right. Straight up and down. The U.S. never was able to break them apart. You understand? The Union was so strong, it surpassed the attempts of the U.S. to break them apart. That's one West, baby. Right. You understand? That is the I.S.U.P.K under Command of General YAHANNA. Clap it up now. So now they were so closely allied that the blacks became known as the Black Seminole. And that's how it's supposed to be. Next slide. So now this is all talking about, you understand, this is from a book right here, The Propagation of the Gospel, Numerous Facts and Arguments, Indians in America. And now it's trying to say that are descended from the 10 tribes of Israel. So these are all different various writers, right? Matter of fact, big ups to Officer Zakawar for this. Officer Zakawar gave me this, you understand, this information. He sent it to me. I read this book in like a night. There's so much more information, including the fact that Africans and the so-called white man were both calling Judites in Africa Negroes. Sidebar. We're going to save that for part 2 of this lecture. So now it starts talking about it starts talking about the authors of this. Dr. Jonathan Edwards, from a time ago, communicated to the Society of Arts in Connecticut to form indigenous observations of the language. If I mess up, it's because this is written in Old English and there's F's instead of S's. And it says of the Mahiganu Indians. So this is talking about the Mohegan verb. It says that the extent of the language in North America, tracing the connection thereof with Hebrew. Indeed, it is no small proof of their Jewish descent. Meaning, this is big proof right here. And this is the second scholar to say the Mohegan language was Hebrew. You understand? So there's nothing but sources when they study this, what the hell language we were speaking. So now it's talking about, once again, their pronouns, their prefixes, their suffixes. Hobbs a Hebrew scholar. You understand? So it's General Q. Should have won a rank order, Salakia. But when you go and you understand what these prefixes and pronouns and suffixes is, and how the only language who has that is Hebrew, which is why it's so easily identifiable. Next slide. So now they start talking about how it differs from all the ancient languages and modern languages in Europe. Meaning what? What is all the European languages? They all have vowels. My man, you know something. This man right here. You understand? So now our language has just class A vowels. It's just ah. I, you know what I'm saying? But everything else is consonants. Ah, ba, ga, da, which they consider a very barbaric language. So now some customs seem also well authenticated among the Indians that appear to be remnant of the Jewish religion. So now we're still talking about the Mohegans. We're still talking about them in the South. It says, so now it starts talking about how they have religious devotion. They practice the Hebrew Passover. All they talk about is their forefathers, which is all that we do. You understand? Talks about how they mourn for the dead. Some suppose too many difficulties about the conveyance of the Indians. So now it starts talking about all these different Indians. So now I want to come over here, right? So now it starts talking about the Creek Indians, and it starts talking about all the different things that they would do inside their tribes. Y'all see down here? It starts talking about Georgia, East. And it starts talking about all these different things, how they celebrated the Passover, all their religious and spiritual traits, all going back to Israel, all have to do with Reuben. Next slide. Now, the last remarkable fact to be made, this is the Indian woman. Right now, this is all talking about Reuben. So it says, in the separation of their woman on certain occasion, the Southern Indians. Now, remember where Reuben was. Reuben was in Georgia. Reuben was in Florida. Reuben was inside these places. So now when it mentions the Southern Indians, this is who it's talking about, oblige their women into the lunar retreats to build small huts at considerable distance from their dwellings, because what would you have to do with a woman when she was unclean, when we were in the kingdom? She had to separate and go stay in her own dwellings. Solomon, balling out of control, built a house for each one of his women. Women, don't think you spoil. We in captivity, man.
Right.
All right. So now it says, and their dwelling houses they imagine to be sufficient, where they are obligated to stay at risk of their lives. Should they be known to violate this ancient law, they must answer to every misfortune that the people meet with. Among the Indians on the northwest of Ohio, the conduct of women seemed perfectly agreeable as far as circumstances will permit with the law of Moses. Young women at the first change in her circumstances immediately separate herself, meaning what? Her flower, her period, herself from the rest, but made some distance from the dwelling houses and remained during the whole time of her Malade, or 7 days. Where else were women supposed to be separated for 7 days, if not for Leviticus, the 15th chapter? The person who brings her victuals is very careful not to touch her, and so cautious is she touching of her own food with her hands that she makes use of sharpened stick instead of a fork, with which she takes up her venison and small ladle of spoon for her other, next slide, food. When the 7 days are ended, she bathes herself in water, washes her clothes, and cleans the vessels as she has made of use. This is Leviticus. This is Levitical law among Reuben. How do we know? Now, once again, a Muskegee woman delivered a child is separated in the manner of 3 moons, or 84 days. So now, once again, by the Levitical law, a woman was to be separated and unclean for 40 days for a man-child, and 80 for a female child. So what you're starting to see is, once again, we start to keep all these laws. This is what Reuben was doing. This is the Muskegee. This is the Creek. This is the Seminole. This is Reuben. Let's take it a step further. Next slide. Yo, when I found this, I wanted to kick a hole in the goddamn wall. I called Captain Chaataza, General Muhammad, and Zakar, and Captain Zakar. I'm putting some respect on your name, man. You get what I'm saying? I wanted to lose my mind. So now, recently discovered the original copy of the migration legend of the Creek people. They said this is not a legend. This is a goddamn map of migration to where they went. Give me the next slide. So now, remember earlier, I told y'all I need y'all to pay attention. Montesinos, who possessed the manuscripts of Luis Lopez, the learned bishops of Quito. Where is Quito? Quito's in Peru. A Portuguese mariner, once again, he studied this in South America, the Jews of the 10 tribes. Next slide. So now, this Portuguese mariner, Antony de Montesinos, arrived in Amsterdam after having lived some years in South America. Next slide. So when he arrived back there, after he was locked up, he said, yo, those were the lost tribes. So when they had this conversation, Shema Yasha'Allah Yahweh Lahayanawa Yahweh Akkad, when they had this conversation about Reuben, that they met Reuben, and Reuben said that the tribes of Joseph were on islands nearby, they were in Peru. Well, what the hell was Reuben doing in Peru? Next slide. What apparently blew the minds of Ivy League scholars was that the elite of the Appalachia, remember the Appalachia was one of the 5 civilized nations of the Seminoles, were obviously of Peruvian origins. So when they met Reuben in Peru, it's because Reuben started in Peru. And when they traced this migration, they went from Peru and they went into Florida, into Georgia, because Reuben is the Seminole Indians. Don't tell me the I.S.U.P.K don't got the truth. You don't know a goddamn thing outside of here. Next slide. 3 other migration legends. So now, when you go and you break down these legends, it talks about where they went, talks about who they thought they were connected to. And originally, now this is what's even more amazing, the Appalachian Creek migration legend arrived from the Atlantic Ocean, meaning that the Bering Strait is bullshit. probably sailing the Gulf Stream northward. High King Chickalee described their first town as being located in downtown Savannah after they migrated up. Appalachia is a Muskegon pronunciation of a Peruvian word that means offspring from the sea, because we came from the Atlantic, because we are those tribes who came to Arsareth. We are those people who left the captivity of Salamanzar and came over here to try to serve our God. Next slide.